One.
Good morning. My name is Peter Hurst. I'm the president and CEO of the Greater New England Minority Supplier Development Council, and I welcome you today to this interesting webinar on the impact of COVID-19 on those who are supply chain providers of services. A few weeks ago, we had a presentation on the impact of COVID-19 in terms of the supply chain providers who are manufacturers, and we thought that given the fact that our economy is so mixed now, it would be very valuable to do the same thing for services. Our partner in this presentation is Bridgewater State University, who is a corporate member of the Greater New England Minority Supplier Development Council. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce Jennifer Reed, who's the Director of Professional, Corporate, and Community Education at Bridgewater State. Jennifer?
Thank you, Peter. We are happy to be here again today with the Greater New England Minority Supplier Development Council to build upon the work of my colleague Corey Bowdry and your organization. Bridgewater is a transfer-friendly university. We accept college credits from accredited 2- or 4-year institutions, allowing you or your staff members to complete your degree more quickly. So if you want to get ahead in your current profession, switch careers, or simply fulfill the dream of earning your undergraduate degree or graduate degree, we have a program that will work for you and your team members. In addition to our 36 undergraduate degree programs and 35 graduate degree programs, we now offer a brand new Bachelor of Science degree in management that is fully online. But keep in mind, unlike other institutions, students in our online programs are not limited to online courses. They can also take courses in person, or they can take courses in a hybrid format where sometimes they come to campus and sometimes they're online. If you'd like to know more about Bridgewater State University, please visit our website at bridgew.edu or feel free to reach out to me directly. We are pleased to have Dr. Patricio Torres Palacio here today to offer this webinar. He is a respected professor in our management department, and he will share his knowledge today on this very important and timely topic. Thank you.
So thank you, Jennifer. And I have the pleasure today of introducing our presenter, Dr. Torres Palacio, who's a PhD, MBA, and Master of Science in Industrial Engineering from Purdue University. In his native country, Ecuador, Dr. Torres Palacio holds degrees in business administration with a concentration in finance, law, computer programming, and he's also a CPA. As Jennifer mentioned, Dr. Torres Palacio is on the faculty at Bridgewater State University. He teaches manufacturing and service operations management, supply chain management, Six Sigma, topics in operations and supply chain management, project management, principles of management, small business management, and business-to-business marketing. His publication topics include Hellenic manufacturing, Six Sigma, lean manufacturing, demand forecasting, project management, finance, and product lifecycle management. And he's also been an entrepreneur. So Dr. Torres Palacio really has the full gamut of experience and educational background to share with us on this very important topic today. So Dr. Torres Palacio, welcome, and thank you in advance for leading us through this presentation.
Okay. Please remember to share the content.
Thank you very much, Peter, Jennifer, for that very kind introduction. I'm gonna share my screen at this moment to be able to show you the presentation. Okay, so as it was mentioned already, we're gonna be talking about the impact of coronavirus COVID-19 in service operations specifically, certainly a very important area, and some reacting strategies that could be kept in mind in order to overcome be able to survive, or hopefully be able to gain competitive advantage, what not, in during these times. Okay, so just as introduction, we can mention the dimensions of service quality. So when we talk about service quality and service operations, so far in through times, we have always focused on reliability, responsiveness, assurance, empathy, and the tangibles. So that has been named the secret in service operations, to be able to keep these issues and these characteristics in mind. So reliability means to perform as promised the service dependably and accurately. For example, I receive the mail at the same time every day, or I subscribe to a newspaper, or receive the newspaper at the same time every day. Responsiveness is the willingness to help customers and provide prompt service. So, for example, avoiding keeping customers waiting for no apparent reason. Assurance is the knowledge and courtesy of employees, as well as their ability to convey trust and confidence. For example, being polite and always showing respect for the customer. Empathy is a provision for caring, individualized attention to customers. For example, making the customer feel that his or her problems are our own. So we're in the same boat and we're achieving the same goals, we're helping. And finally, tangibles are the appearance of physical facilities, equipment, personnel, communication, materials. For example, the cleanliness of the particular facility or place. And this is where we have to highlight, this is even more important. This has paramount importance these days, the cleanliness, precisely because of the coronavirus. So the tangibles was the physical facilities that these days have been less used because of the pandemic, precisely. For example, in university, Bridgewater State University, in order to provide a good service, in order to give good service to our students, we need we needed the classrooms, the physical classrooms, the desks and chairs, computers, projectors. So that will be the tangibles. So this was a reminder of what has always been placed emphasis on until today. And as we know, now the situation, the whole world has been changing because of COVID-19. So here we have a graph. As we know, it all started in China, and unfortunately has been spreading more and more globally. It's interesting to know and to remember that the industry in China was being very efficient, prosperous, as we can see in this graph, up to year 2020 precisely. So we see how much it has grown, the industrial production, including the services from year 2000, over 2 decades. And it has been precisely starting in year 2019 and 2020, we see this abrupt decrease in the industrial production. So the industry in China has fallen 13.5%. And it has been followed by industries in other places in the world, of course. So the issues affecting service operations that were brought by COVID-19 specifically, we can mention transparency, estimate available inventory relative to services, demand forecast, response to shortage buying behavior of customers, optimize of capacities, management of cash. So the transparency, it's important to create transparency on multi-tier supply chain. So in the different levels, the different links of the supply chain. This process will begin by identifying the most important elements of the operations. So cooperation with the operations and production divisions to review the sources and origins of these components. After that, we have done all these efforts. We should identify the elements that are sourced from the most affected areas. Estimate a available inventory relative to services. This is important and has brought a new scope and a new point of view lately. For several years, many times, well, let's start with a long time ago. It was the idea that companies have great levels of inventory was better because inventory by accounting is considered an asset. So the more property that the company has and assets, the better, and they have enough to satisfy demand. Later on, more modern techniques advised to keep the inventory levels as low as possible. We have heard about just-in-time techniques. So inventory from the operations point of view could be a liability, believe it or not. And it's not that accounting principles are wrong. So it is an asset because it belongs to the company. But from an operations point of view, many times it's seen as a liability because it's something that the company owes to itself, or they owe to the shareholders. They have to sell that inventory. If they don't sell it and they just keep it in warehouses piling up, what good does it make? Now with the coronavirus, probably the inventory starts piling up again. Demand forecast here is important to try to forecast that demand, try to predict the demand as accurate as possible. And this is a big challenge these days because of the big fluctuation that coronavirus has brought. Response to shortage by behavior of customers. This is what we know as increasing communication channels with the customers, what these days is known as VOC, the voice of the customers. Optimization of capacities, so optimize production and the distribution, most especially for services, that comes equipped with the demand forecast that we mentioned that is important to consider. So the company with this will optimize the production and distribution capacity. The most important thing in this step is to apply the safety guidelines to guarantee a safe environment precisely for the employees and communicate the risks associated with the crisis. We're going to be talking more about risks in a few minutes. And finally, management of cash. Well, we have to mention also that the time value in operations management is decreasing the lead time. So in addition to prioritizing the capacity for the most important deliveries during the crisis, it will be very important to consider the lead time. Hopefully it could be decreased. And this will be an important source these days of coronavirus to gain competitive advantage. The company that provides the services with a shorter lead time may gain more space, more niches in the market. And this has to be included, as we mentioned here in this last point, in the management of cash. I would say, I will dare to say that no other time the analysis of a cash flow has been more important than these days. Any project, any possible contact with new suppliers and contact with customers, every project now it's imperative that it has the flow cash analysis. Obviously, if the cash flow it's a positive number that will give the green light to proceed, and if it's negative, that will be the red light. Sorry. So it will not be a good business. Something to keep in mind. Now, these days, you can see in this graph, it's very interesting. This is what is going on in service operations. We see these in this chart, in which here in the y-axis we have the financial risk as an indicator of resilience. So from lower financial risk to higher financial risk. Here in the x-axis we have the degree affected by COVID-19, from less affected to more affected. So we have this Cartesian plane, and the size of the circles indicate the millions of jobs that we have in that particular sector. And we have several examples here of the different kinds of services, accommodations and food services, administrative and support, arts, entertainment, construction, education service, here up here, education services like universities, of course, and so on, a big group, big array of services. And the color here, as we can see, also less affected, higher financial risk is in this blue color. Less affected, lower financial risk is the light blue. And the black one is more affected, higher financial risk, and the darker blue, more affected, lower financial risk. So here we can see that in terms of millions of jobs in the sector, the greatest ones are accommodations and food services, precisely, and the retailing regarding this, which probably has suffered the greatest changes and impacts these days because of shortages and because a change of behavior in the customer. We can talk more about the food industry in a few minutes. So in the food industry, precisely, most especially in our country, in America, there's an intense retail competition, and the customers always have many choices, Walmart, Kroger, and so on. But people have been used to have the choice, and there was price competition. The main focus, therefore, is to match supply and demand. And there was, as we mentioned it before, lots of inventory. Now with coronavirus, the shelves were empty in the food industry. There, as we will remember, a few weeks ago or a couple of months ago, there was a lack of toilet paper. Every element needs to function correctly in order for the supply chain in services can work. Warehouses, store, employees, but all of these are roles with little automation and they usually or traditionally require a face-to-face contact. And in addition to that, customers were used to merchandising. They were used to try free samples, talk to people, and obviously this has decreased, if not completely disappeared. Now the food is being consumed at home, so big change. And the food industry is pretty much delivering. So therefore, the importance of distribution and delivery channels in the food industry, which is one of the greatest, as we can see. Healthcare is another great area in terms of the millions of jobs that we have. Another one, construction. Here we can see the D, construction. And here is an interesting thing to watch, a little bit isolated here in the lower left corner is F, finance and insurance. Is less affected by the coronavirus and lower financial risk. So an interesting question comes to mind. How come the financial and insurance has been the less affected by the coronavirus and has displayed a lower financial risk? So with that example or that leadership from this service in particular, we can analyze what they do and probably emulate to be able to benefit for the other services. So the first step, we're going to analyze about the financial services. They quantify the risk always in financial services. And it's very common and well known, the method called the standard deviation of return method, which mathematically is calculated with the formula that we see here, square root of E R squared minus ER, all that squared, where R is the return per year and E is expected value and ER is the expected return per year. So this has been a common practice in finance, and risk management, something that I truly believe that we should keep a stronger emphasis or a stronger consideration, not only for finance and insurance, which has been traditionally done, but now it's imperative to emulate that and use it in all industries and all kinds of services. So going back here to this area, investments can be characterized by their expected return and standard deviation of return, which ultimately determines the risk that we are facing. And these days, coronavirus has increased our risks, and I would say never has been more important to be aware of the risks than ever before. Many times, managers just make decisions out of historical data, sometimes even out of feeling or a hunch. But that could be these days, most especially these days of coronavirus, like trying to walk in the darkness or being completely blind. But so therefore, the paramount importance of considering and making decisions based on the most accurate numbers as possible, and again, considering the risk. So the expected return is defined as the addition of probability times the return. We're going to see an example in a second. So to quantify the risk through standard deviation of return over 1 year is that what they always do in finance and insurance services. The standard deviation, again, is defined square root of ER squared minus ER, all of these squared. So let's see an example. Let's say that there's an investment of $100,000 in equities. So we have here in this small table that you see at the left, the probabilities and the possible returns. So probability of 5%, for example, will have a return of 50%. Probability of 0.25 will give a return of 30%, and so on. So our first step, we calculate the factor ER, as we can see here. So to calculate the factor ER, we simply multiply each probability times the corresponding result, and we add all that together according to the formula. So here we have the formula again, addition of probability times return. And this is what we have done here in this example. 0.5 times 8.5 plus 0.25 times 30%, 0.30 plus 0.40 times 10%, 0.10, and so on. So we obtain a factor ER of 0.10. The next factor we calculate is ER squared. And so the alternative squares return, but their probabilities must be weighted. So again, applying the formula, so in here the formula again, we will get into the standard deviation, which ultimately will lead us to the risk. And for that, we need the ER squared, which is we calculate here. ER squared is simply multiplying, again, every probability times the corresponding result, the return, squared, as we can see in the example. 0.05 times 0.5, this time squared, plus 0.25 times 0.30, this time squared, plus 0.40 times 0.10, this time squared, and so on. So we solve this, we add all these together, and we obtain a value for ER squared of 0.046, 0.046. Now that we have ER and ER squared, we can calculate the standard deviation using the formula displayed before. Standard deviation, ER squared minus ER, all of this squared, and we obtain the square root. So applying the formula, we obtain 0.1897 as the standard deviation. Therefore, the risk in this particular project is 18.97%. I would advocate that every service should do an analysis such as this one, trying to analyze the possible returns that they can obtain from the sales or the offerings of their services with the corresponding probabilities and analyze the risk in that particular market. Therefore, the best possible decisions could be obtained could be made and avoid disaster or bad situations. Now, we also consider what is known as the efficient frontier of risky investments. Again, something that we can copy from the finance and insurance services for all the other services. So here we have again a Cartesian plane with the expected return here in the y-axis, and we have down here in the x-axis the standard deviation of return, which we just calculated, the risks. So what is the efficient frontier? As we add more investments to a portfolio, we will be moving northwest in terms of the expected return versus the standard deviation versus the risk. So considering every possible portfolio of the available risky investments, we obtain what is known as the efficient frontier, which is the curve that we see here. This represents the limit of how far we can move in a northwest direction. The idea is that this efficient frontier should move or should be to the left and to the here up and the left, the upper left corner. So in other words, to the northwest as more as possible to have better expected returns and less risk. Now, of course, it is obvious that with the coronavirus, the efficient frontier now has gone in the opposite direction, southeast. So we have a greater risk and probably a smaller expected return. So what should be kept in mind here? We should consider a point F, like the one we see here in this graph, which is a risk-free investment, something that it will be sure, completely risk-free, standard deviation 0, as we can see. Obviously, the expected return will be the least possible, but it's a standard deviation 0 or risk-free, 0 risk. So on the other hand, we have J up here in this line. That is the opposite. That will be the riskiest. So the greatest expected return, but also the greatest standard deviation or the greatest risk, as we can see here in the Cartesian plane. So this creates this line FJ, which represents several investments. Again, with F being the safest and J being the riskiest. Now, this point M that we see here is a point of tangency of the line with the efficient frontier that we explained before. This is what we know as the market portfolio. So all the points in this FJ line are better investments because they are to the left of the northwest of the previous efficiency frontier, as we can see. So they are better. So they give a better risk-return combination and becomes part of a new investment frontier. So we have moved upwards to the northwest. This will be our new efficient frontier. So with a risk-free investment is considered, the efficient frontier must be a straight line. This means that there should be a linear trade-off between the expected return and the standard deviation of return or the risk. So what lessons do we obtain from financial services? When the risk-free investment is considered, the efficient frontier must be a straight line, as we already mentioned. There should be a linear trade-off between the expected return and the standard deviation of returns. All investors should choose the same portfolio of risky assets. That is the point M, point of the market. Risky investments should be combined with borrowing or lending at the risk-free rate. And to ensure the balance between the supply and demand of each investment, which ultimately the main challenge for service operations and the supply chain. So of each investment, the price of each risky investment must adjust so that the amount of that investment in portfolio M is proportionate to the amount of that investment available in the economy. So this is sounds easier said than done, but governments will have a crucial role in this to help them to have the investments available in the economy and make it proportional. We'll talk more about what governments can do in a few minutes. So now the morale for service businesses obtained from this example that we have analyzed of a particular service, finance and insurance. So we should emulate the risk management performed by the finance and insurance service companies. So always try to obtain that risk ratio, that risk percentage that will lead to better decisions and what to do in services. Plus, that's why I put here a big plus, apply the VOC, voice of the customer. So voice of the customer, which is a modern technique these days. So it means listen to the customer. In many cases, invite the customer to be part of the decisions and the processes. And I included here, complaints are welcome. Nobody likes complaints, but in this case, we have to see it that way. So complaints should be, complaint handling policy should be as follows. Every complaint is treated as a gift. Welcome complaints, encourage customers to complain, make it easy to complain. We handle complaints fast. Treat complaints in a fair manner. Empower our employees to handle complaints, and don't be ashamed, don't be shy to express what they feel and what they need. The best ideas for improvement, not only in services, but in production and manufacturing, comes from, guess who? The employees, precisely, because they're the ones who are handling and managing the business on a daily basis, hour after hour, day after day. So the best suggestions come from them. Previous decades, it was management is the king or the queen, and they didn't hear employees, not anymore. So employees is important. And we encourage the complaints as mentioned. Have a customer employee friendly system and friendly environment. Reward employees who handle the complaints in a good way. And keep records of complaint. Keep them in mind, constantly obtaining feedback and constantly improve. This will be something similar to what professors we try to do. Of course, we do not like if a student complains about something, but we encourage them to tell us what they think and give us a constant feedback so we can improve for the benefit of students. So not a better example for the application of this, that precisely in services, education, university. We professors, we try to do this. Now, looking at some solutions or strategies, there's something that I call it inevitable, the digitization. Digital transformation refers to converging processes, activities, and models to meet digital economy requirements until the company is a fully networked digital organization. So coronavirus is pushing us, like it or not, to digitization. Unfortunately, in certain cases, it's very hard to achieve, even though some solutions have been considered lately. I was mentioning before on the other side of the graph that we saw with the millions, that circle, big circle that represented millions of employees. It was the services of foods or the food supply chain. So even here, automation has been considered the answer. These days, robots are moving around to check inventory. At Stop and Shop, for those of us who have ever bought over there, we will remember that they already had like a robot that was going around all the aisles and informing where garbage was so somebody can go and clean it. A few weeks ago, I saw a very interesting video. In Japan, they use robots, and those robots were carrying the chest level, more or less, a big tablet with a connection, video connection for every student, and that's how they celebrated the commencement with the use of robots. And The students were in their houses and the robots were the ones who moved around and received the diplomas and everything. Walmart has a Bossa Nova robot which goes around checking inventory. Target has announced the same. IBM has announced video tracking, which enables social distancing to count the number of people in the store. And obviously, we are talking about online ordering. So why is digitization important in services? So we can say that when companies decide to migrate to digital, it's important to its survival. This is absolutely true these days of coronavirus. Connectivity between employees, there's a better channels of communication, therefore possibility of solving problems, obtaining good solutions with a better communication. Agility, remote working, which keeps everybody safe, and competitive advantage over other companies, especially in a fast-paced environment, and a quick reaction to the customer, which in service operations is crucial. So trends that drive this digital transformation is the employee engagement, workforce generational diversity, the work flexibility, and of course, the rise and popularity of the internet. And now, with a big sign, we can add the coronavirus. The coronavirus is now the trend that is driving this digital transformation more and more. What are the advantages of digitization, which could be a solution during this time for service operations? Elimination of transcription errors, no physical limits for storage, integration of business systems, improve accessibility to information, increase safety of any critical data. We're talking about safety of the data, but most importantly, safety of the people. We have this virus. Integrated online resource sharing, reduce chances of missing data. Many users can access the digital file and share it and express their opinions, suggestions, compatibility with all modes of digital data transfer. Now, what are some disadvantages of digitization? Sometimes data security. So this is a double-edged sword. We mentioned that data security could be greater, could be safer with digitization, but at the same time, it could also be riskier. If we find somebody who is more expert in digitization, hackers or something, then we can have this disadvantage. So it's really a double-edged sword. Crime and terrorism, complexity, privacy concerns, social disconnect, anonymity, and fake people, fake personas. This has been happening a lot lately. Plagiarism and copyright, job insecurity. I would add anxiety, digital media manipulation, which will require pretty soon new legislation to keep it fair and legal for everybody. Work overload and over reliance on gadgets. So that reliance on mechanical or electronic device or tools, especially those new ones, have the novel issue incorporated. So this will be the procedure to implement that digitization. Adopt an MRP, which has been discussed for many years right now, or an intranet. Now it's more needed than ever. Create a QR tag for every employee and link it to a database, which will be connected to a power or central database. The QR code is a type of matrix barcode. Firstly, that it was originally designed in 1994, and I'm sure everybody has seen these a lot. It's those strange-looking squares. So it's like reading the barcode. Now the employee will scan his or her tag when starting to work in a task. The timer will start. Management will know exactly the quantity that was done for that day, or even the quality in terms of further appraisal. And once the employee is done, he or she will stack the tag again, and the timer will end. Management visually checks the quality of the work done. And this is some useful strategy that had its origins in the techniques of re-engineering the corporation. Each employee rotates to a different station every day for a week. This is something that Intel has been doing for many years. And at the end of the week, management checks the database and analyzes it. With the purpose of this management can reorient or reassign employees to wherever place, workstation, department, where they have greater skills. So tracking performance and efficiency, this is known as IQMS ERP, it's a modern ERP, could be very beneficial because it offers a lot of reporting and monitoring functionalities, including financial reporting, floor shop monitoring, production planning, scheduling, shipment management. The milk runs, which is a strategy in which we create a network of communication and collaboration with suppliers and retailing, so we can guarantee that nobody will stand us up in terms of a delivery. So everything will be all in one, no need for multiple software. Everything will be here in this IQMS. However, we can still use current systems in order to track historical data. So the benefits for using this is lean thinking, avoiding waste, or what the Japanese mention as muda, technical word is muda, tracking customer service per operation sales in a real time, be able to reduce that lead time that we were mentioning before, which is certainly very important and possibly the key to achieve competitive advantage. Tracking the process, measuring overall performance, real-time floor management, and again to reassign positions to where workers will be better utilized and offer the best for the company. Now, some strategies during the COVID-19, in addition to the digitization and its advantages that we already mentioned, I created this, it looks like a temple, and here on the top, the cuspid, we see survival during COVID-19, or even achievement of competitive advantage, why not? So that will be the ultimate goal. So in order to go there, to go to the top, the base will be information sharing, channel alignment, and operational endeavors and reports on a timely manner. In other words, operational efficiency, making demand available at downstream site to an upstream. The downstream site is the customer. Applying EDI. So this is electronic data interchange, and POS, point of sale system, in order to break the order batches. So everything will be more consistent. We can predict that demand or keep it more steady instead of having those big fluctuations. Then reduce price discount and using strategies like everyday low pricing system to attack price fluctuations, which has been very common as a result of coronavirus. Sharing sales capacity and inventory data that can be helpful to eliminate the shortage and inefficiencies and lack of communication, misunderstandings even. So it's important. And here on the top, apply just-in-time techniques. And what I'm going to mention in the next slide, just to conclude, holonic manufacturing. We have heard a lot of just-in-time. The idea is that the company should work synchronized, coordinated, like a watch or like a clock. Now, I know what you're thinking. This is better, easier said than done. And I must say this has depended a lot on the idiosyncrasy and even the culture in different countries. Where I come from originally, Ecuador in Latin America, I have always commented with my students in class, very honestly, it has been very difficult to apply because even if we handle our company synchronized, very coordinated, like a clock, we always depend on external sources like our suppliers. So if my supplier didn't come today, then I am in trouble, even though I was planning everything correctly. So we still depend on others. So it's a matter of having the whole community, the whole society very disciplined. I have asked my students to express their opinions if just in time is successfully applied here in America, and it has. And Japan, for example, because of their culture, their idiosyncrasy, they're very disciplined and has provided good results. And holonic manufacturing. Holonic manufacturing is something that I made a particular interest in my own research and publications. And sorry. So holonic manufacturing is forming a network of virtual teams. So now instead of just in time dealing directly and personally, now we form virtual teams. A holon originally was a concept developed in biology. It was a cell, it is a cell that has autonomy, but it also forms a network of communication. So this concept was applied to operations. And what we see here is a holon, these big squares here. It has a control unit or leader, the coordination model, a small team, and the internal database where the information is kept. So everything is shared with other holons, other branches around the world. Here in the back, we see the world, and then it comes back. So for example, a great design was came to mind in America. We send it to Europe. Well, they will improve it and add good materials. Then they will send it to Japan. Well, they will finally be manufacturing or offering that service in Japan, and then coming back with improved suggestions to America. So forms a cycle, which is virtual, using the technology. This is what we call holonic structure or holonic manufacturing that we call. So definitely a good suggestion for these times of coronavirus. So I want to thank you at this point. Thank you very much. Gracias. And we're going to open for questions and discussion.
So thank you, Dr. Torres Palacio. Let me just down a bit.
Okay.
So if we look going forward, it seems like the financial services industry is probably shown that they're best equipped to provide services, amidst the COVID-19 impact. And there's some industries that, seem to have been devastated, in terms of services by COVID-19, education, accommodations and food services, retail trade, entertainment and recreation, and healthcare. Putting aside healthcare for the moment, of some of those other industries, what strategies would you recommend? Because, for example, in terms of entertainment and recreation, in the near term, no one's going to movies, no one's going to go to a restaurant and eat inside. What in terms of, measuring, doing that return analysis, that risk analysis, what types of suggestions would you make for those high touch service related industries would you recommend?
Okay, certainly it's an excellent question. I must add to that concern that a recent study performed by McKinsey Corporation has mentioned that between 1.4 million and 2.1 million U.S. small businesses in services could close permanently as a result of first 4 months of pandemic. And certain sectors in particular are at a higher risk. The food industry, entertainment, of course, airlines, as you were mentioning, so other kinds of industry. I truly believe that one way to combat this situation, and it has to be done aggressively, in the good sense, of course, is to include or increase our R&D, research and development, and put our eyes on software markets. Yes. So increase or try to automate as possible, as I was mentioning, digitization, which is possible even for services or products, in this case, as difficult to automate, like food, like Walmart, Target, as I was mentioning before, because of the real nature, the characteristics of this, it was more person to person. But even with that, they are applying the use of robots in many circumstances and online ordering. I truly believe also that one way to or solution to this and other kinds of industries was electronic commerce, which is already has been increasing. Now, for example, in certain products and other industries, as was mentioned, like food, for example, there are new concerns that come to mind in the sense of the feeling of the customers. For example, with food, now the worry will be who has touched my food. What pesticides have been used before that food was delivered in my home, even when I was safe because I didn't go to the restaurant. And before it was like 50% of food was outside in restaurants. Now it's everything at home. But it comes at new concerns of customers. Who could touch it before I did? What pesticides have been used? Any secondary effects? Same thing with clothing. If you order something, clothing, so who touched this? Is there any possibility of getting the virus through this? So that brings a different kind of panic that we also have to deal with. So these are important considerations that we have to create particular rules, clear rules that will decrease the anxiety or even the panic of customers in other industries as well. And I was mentioning before, I think that the governments in all countries definitely have a very important role in order to allocate more resources and work together with private companies in order to avoid the deficits that it will create in the economy. So in that sense, it could be things that could be done to other sectors of services and operations.
So let me just follow up on that. I mean, in terms of those riskier sectors that you identified in terms of higher impact, higher costs, how are they going to find the capital necessary to affect digital transformation? Because that probably is the only way they get from where they are now, which is on a road to oblivion, to some type of path of survivability. It's going to be digital transformation, but how do they get the capital to make that happen?
Yeah, that's also an excellent question. Part of it should be with our own effort, trying to survive and obtain competitive advantage in the market, as we were mentioning, therefore trying to be more profitable. Now, one way of doing this, and I was mentioning when I showed here this temple to represent the possible solutions to survive and even achieve competitive advantage, is to reduce price discount over here in the center, the columns in green color, and everyday low pricing. It might sound contradictory, but this will be a way for companies to act and interact under the new challenges of these days and be more profitable. Why is this? Because most likely, in most cases, businesses right now, because of the coronavirus, we have an elasticity demand that is elastic. So we remember the concept of elasticity demand is a measure of how elastic or how sensible it is, the quantity demanded with every change in the price. So in normal products, I'm leaving aside what we call as given products, or luxury products like luxury cars, jewelries, which have another behavior in the economy. But normal products, the rule in the economy is that we decrease price and the quantity demanded will increase. So these days we are observing elastic demands. So if the demand is elastic or very sensitive, therefore we'll change the price, the everyday low pricing, and that will generate an increase in the quantity demanded. And because it's very elastic, in other words, the price elasticity of demand is equal to 1. Is greater than 1, sorry. Therefore, it's elastic. That means it's very sensitive. So for a very low discounting pricing, which apparently will make us lose money, in exchange for that, the quantity demanded will increase a lot. So we will make profits based on selling higher volumes rather than selling more expensive. That will be the idea, and that will be the part of private companies. Now, a second part, I think that governments could also do in several countries, of course, could do a lot in terms of helping for that capital. Subsidies in many cases. The United States has provided excellent subsidies and obtained excellent results with subsidies in agriculture, for example. Now it's we need to think in the sector of technology more than ever. So governments worldwide have already allocated more than $13 trillion to stabilize their economies in a free fall and to restart the growth. But again, citing McKinsey Corporation that did a study, so worldwide, it's estimated that this has created deficits that could reach $30 trillion by year 2023. So how can we avoid or try to manage those deficits is precisely with the cooperation of a private industries and private companies. So in other words, working together, government through their help and resource allocations and investment in technology, and the private sector, we could achieve good results in COVID-19, I believe, on the one side. And on the other side, the deficit for governments will not be a complete disaster. So that could be a good suggestion.
So two more quick questions. If you could go back to the slide where you laid out the risk by sector. I think
Is one?
Yeah, that's it.
Yes.
Would this slide change if the pandemic is a 2-year event rather than a 1-year event, in your opinion?
Yes, certainly it will. The time issue is, I believe, the greatest variable. And if the pandemic continues its disaster situation as we have faced so far, well, the two results or two consequences that we will see in this graph. These circles will be smaller, much smaller, because there will be millions of jobs less in those particular sectors. And at the same time, these circles will be moving to the upper right corner. So more affected by coronavirus and higher financial risk. So this could happen because of the time issue. The coronavirus continues, and no cure or vaccine is being obtained or foreseen in the near future, and or the panic. In finance, we were talking about finance services before. In most particular in the stock market, there's something that is called the sentiment of investors, or investor sentiment. So panics, definitely, as we have seen several examples before in history, have affected the stock market. Now, the same thing here, a panic or a lack of responsibility of the population or the people in general could also bring the same result, that these circles go to the northeast section and they will be reduced. So that's what I would foresee that will happen.
Okay, thank you. And one final question. You know, our stakeholders include both corporate members as well as diverse suppliers. And if you look at in our region, the average revenue of our diverse suppliers is about 10 million. So they have some constraints in terms of access to capital, constraints in terms of capacity, both financial and operational.
Mm-hmm.
How do our diverse suppliers compete in a world where, you know, digital transformation is going to be more important and where, you know, price is going to be more important?
Well, I certainly believe that a solution for that is in the strategy called as milk runs. So, for example, in a particular region, a particular country or a state, let's say our great state of Massachusetts, well, we can give it a new point of view and a new scope. So suppliers not necessarily need to compete to each other and therefore have those problems of capacities and the finance, but they rather join forces. That is the purpose of the strategy called the milk runs. So they form part of a network, and where corporations need a particular supply, they can rely on this network. And here we kill two birds with the same stone, as is commonly said, because I was mentioning before here in precisely some suggestions for improvement in this tempo just in time. And I was mentioning in Latin America, I have seen this a lot where I came from. We work very coordinatedly, very perfectly, but the supplier didn't come because that person had an accident or the truck didn't work. And, okay, now I'm in big trouble. I cannot do my job. But with the milk runs, we have a network, a complete network of collaboration. It can always be substituted by another supplier. Therefore, instead of competing, they can work together, and I think that will solve, of course, not entirely, but it will contribute a lot for their capacities and their financial problems that these days we have observed. And it is like these days in the dental care. So with the use of dental insurance, we can pick from a whole network of dentists. So all the dentists that belong to that network and work with that insurance are available to me. Therefore, I can pick the one that is closer to my house or the one that I like the most, the one that I prefer. Or if something doesn't work, I can rely on another one because the insurance works with an entire network of dentists. It will be a similar idea with the suppliers with this new technique called milk runs.
Thank you. So Dr. Torres Palacio, I want to thank you again for another very informative presentation. I think this has been very helpful to all of our stakeholders, our corporate members, and our diverse suppliers. I want to let everyone know that this session has been recorded and it will be made available. And I'm assuming we'll have access, Dr. Torres Palacio, to your presentation that we can share with the participants. So I want to thank you again, and Jennifer, I want to thank you and Bridgewater State for your partnership. You know, hopefully we will find other interesting topics to have Dr. Torres Palacio present on, and one day we'll be beyond COVID-19. But until then, this, I think, has been very useful for everyone. So thank you again. And for everyone who attended, thank you. And have a wonderful holiday this weekend. And please stay safe.
Okay, thank you also, Peter, Jennifer, to all the attendants to this virtual conference and all the team. All together did a great job. And I am very grateful to have had the opportunity to contribute with this presentation, and for future occasions I will always be honored. So it has been my pleasure.
We're going to take you up on that.
Sure, with pleasure.
Take care.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
Bye, take care, keep healthy.